Throughout this series, we have navigated a series of human rights violations, state crimes, and institutional complicity in the Irish states. Today, we stand at the penultimate episode. Larry Tighe's demagogue, the life and long shadow of Joseph McCarthy, has served as our guiding light into the world of McCarthyism. Along with Tighe's work, we have consulted commission papers, police plans, UN guidelines and principles, and have given a thorough review of academic journals, all of which show nearly every institution in the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland has been dominated and controlled by a principal figure. In this episode, my observations and complaints will be used as a charging document to make the case that the principal is culpable and should be charged with organized crime. Before we move forward, please understand that this video is not intended to incite hatred or violence. All the events that we will cover are going to be personal and hard to hear, but are necessary to hold power to account before we move forward on this path of crimes against humanity. I'm Kiana Canada, and this is Mimicking McCarthyism, where I have uncovered a new iteration of McCarthyism in Belfast that silences Black American stories on the island, and why I feel the principal should be publicly charged with obstruction of justice. It is important to emphasize that all the matters discussed in this video will be protected under the honest opinion and public interest doctrine and other applicable defenses. Because the state agents mentioned in this video have not ceased their actions, this video is more important now than it is ever. An offense is transnational if it satisfies one of a number of native conditions. A, it is committed in more than one state. B, it is committed in one state, but a substantial part of its preparation, planning, direction, or control takes part in another state. C, it is committed in one state but involves an organized crime group that engages in criminal activities in more than one state. And D, it is committed in one state but has a substantial effect in another state. In the United Kingdom, it's criminal law. The standard of proof for criminal conviction is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And with this, I'll start reading the charges. Count 1, conspiracy to harass. Our journey began in 2020 at the Belfast Reception Center, a microcosm of families, women, and men. Direct provision was a place meant to provide sanctuary from persecution, yet it turned into something radically different from that which had initially been explained to me. I recall the instances of morality policing from some of the Arabic men, encouraging me to adopt and wear the hijab. While these actions were an unwelcome intrusion on personal autonomy, the question is, can I prove beyond all reasonable doubt that these men conspired with the principal to harass me? A person must not pursue a course of conduct which amounts to harassment of another, which he knows or ought to know amounts to harassment of another. Harassment includes, quote, the causing of alarm and distress, end quote. Although the incidents at Belseskin were distressing, I must state that there is insufficient evidence to show the men engaging in morality policing conspired with the agent of persecution. Count 2, aiding transnational organized crime. My friendship formed during the COVID-19 pandemic with a man from Gaza was genuine on my part. Although I was a neoteric at the time, it's important for me to state that in 2020, I knew nothing about Palestinians, nor did I know the history between the Israel conflict with Palestine. Yet, I often observed my Palestinian friend in a secluded spot inside a taxi, engaged in a conversation with an older Irish man. He explained that this man was a friend, a taxi driver he knew, who actually knew much about his homeland and had even hosted him for dinner. At the time, I found it to be peculiar that an Irishman would extend such an invitation to an asylum seeker. And after I learned I was being made to undergo transnational repression, I cannot deny that I placed him on my bulletin board of persons that could have been involved. For me to prove aiding transnational organized crime, I have to show that he assisted an agent of persecution to commit the principal offense. Here, this is perhaps collecting private information with the intent to obstruct justice, namely obstruction of my asylum proceedings. Moreover, I need to show the agent of persecution encouraged the Palestinian man to engage in the following: the use of physical force, threats, or intimidation, or the promise, offering, or giving an undue advantage so as to obstruct my asylum proceedings. The travaux préparatoires to Article 23 indicates that the term proceeding is intended to cover all official government proceedings. The use of force, threats, and inducements for false testimony can occur at any time, regardless of whether formal proceedings are in progress or not. Now, with a deeper understanding of the historical and political affinity Irish people claim they have with the people of Gaza, the Palestinian man's friendship with the Irishman is entirely plausible to me. The evidence before me does not permit me to move forward with a public charge of obstructing justice, nor to classify the man as anything other than a taxi driver. However, the events that followed strongly suggest that the Irish government has utilized this period as a pretext for my subsequent persecution. This could resurrect the obstruction of justice public charge. You may ask, but why would the Republic of Ireland single out my asylum claim? My asylum claim contained details that perhaps bore an uncomfortable resemblance to the historical actions of the Irish Republican Army. Furthermore, my public statements regarding the morality policing within the direct provision system, a system the government is keen to control, were a direct challenge to their narrative. A state, like any institution, seeks to control the flow of information. Based on the evidence, I can definitely say my voice and my independent perspective was perceived as a threat to informational hegemony. In other words, the Republic of Ireland and the United States, for their own distinct reasons, saw my counter ideas as a liability and sought to undermine it, as well as my credibility through a consistent campaign of intimidation, interfering with my testimony or the evidence I would produce at my international protection proceedings. Thus, the element for obstruction of justice has been met and has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Count 3, causing fear of violence. In 2021, I was transferred to another accommodation in the city of Waterford. It was smaller than Balseskin and quiet, which housed families, women, and men. Yet it presented a more stark and frankly more disturbing tableau. Staff revealed to me that an American asylum seeker, who we will call Seth, resided in the accommodation. The staff encouraged me to meet Seth. Seth is white, perhaps in his late 50s, disheveled hair, who frequently wore a white lab coat. While I never entered his room nor asked to, I couldn't help but notice the exterior of Seth's door was lined with egg crates. Was he a musician? He never claimed to be a singer, nor did he ever claim to do YouTube videos. So why did he have this on his door? Speckled across this channel, I discussed my conversations with this man and what he told me. While the evidence before me indicates Seth was the victim of the actions of the United States and the Irish government, I cannot prove beyond a reasonable doubt that either obstructed justice. I can, however, move forward with a lesser charge of causing fear of violence for both Seth and myself. However, there is one problem. I'm encountering a jurisdictional issue in the Seth case. Absolute universality is not generally applied to transnational crimes by analogy to the core international crimes because they serve different interests. For instance, I would need to connect the fear of violence to a transnational crime like obstruction of justice, which I cannot prove beyond a reasonable doubt, even though I believe it occurred. However, in my own case, the law permits me to move forward with this on jurisdictional grounds. Under Section 6 of the Protection from Harassment Northern Ireland Order 1997, the United States and the Republic of Ireland's course of conduct caused me fear on at least 2 occasions at the Waterford accommodation that violence would be used against me. Both knew or ought to have known their actions in the Waterford accommodation would cause me fear. A reasonable and prudent person witnessing and hearing the disclosures that I did would think the course of conduct would cause the other to fear on the occasions that I mentioned. Further, the agents of persecution's course of conduct was not pursued for the purpose of preventing or detecting crime, nor does it meet any other elemental defenses. But did the United States and the Republic of Ireland conspire to obstruct justice at this point? While I may be able to publicly convict them of the lesser offense of causing fear of violence, the evidence before me does not permit me to move forward with a public charge of obstructing justice. Count 4, obstructing justice. Kinsale Road Accommodation Center, Crackett's, where the transnational crimes became more sophisticated. I met a Pakistani Muslim woman, and she and I became really good friends. But as human beings, we possess an innate ability to discern authenticity. The friendship over time felt transactional, and it lacked organic reciprocity of a genuine bond. I'm reminded of the accounts in Ronan Farrow's Catch and Kill, where Rose McGowan asserted a woman named Stella Pashanak strategically inserted herself as a friend into her life, much like the Pakistani woman did in my life. While she was a genuine and legitimate asylum seeker, her conduct strongly suggests she conducted a deep exploration into running from empty shoes, my memoir, to gather blackmail information to obstruct my asylum claim. But for whom? The evidence points inexorably to the United States and the Republic of Ireland. Ireland's interest could have been to secure cooperation and with the promise of a financial incentive. The United States' interest was coercive repatriation efforts, both perpetrating transnational repression to obstruct justice. Let me be unequivocal. The notion that this campaign is being orchestrated by Israel, China, or Russia is not supported by the facts. Even considering that line of inquiry that Israel may be involved is not supported by evidence. In 2021, I had no knowledge of Israeli politics and didn't start researching the Palestinian Israeli conflict until the fall of 2025. Crucially, I never made any statements concerning Israel nor against Israel, nor have I ever made any anti Semitic remarks. Given Republic of Ireland's contentious history with Israel, it's difficult for me to believe that it would allow Israeli intelligence operatives to compromise multiple asylum seekers just to oppress someone who knew nothing about Israeli politics, never said anything about or against Israel, nor said anything anti Semitic. So, not Israel. Well, what about the China angle? I knew nothing about Chinese politics at the time. My understanding now is very minimal. Further, I never said anything about or against China, nor said anything criticizing the Sinosphere. So, not China. Well, what about Russia? In the similar vein, I knew nothing about Russian politics, never said anything about Russia or against Russia. The pages of Running from Empty Shoes are marked by three coincidental phrases: Cassandra, Potemkin Village, and Russian boots. They sound like a preamble to an international incident, but the truth is far more mundane and far more personal. Cassandra was the name a man that I had corresponded with questioned me, a woman he saw as persecuted, a private, painful reference that had nothing to do with collusion. Potemkin Village was the title I gave to an old blog, a platform dedicated to tearing down the facade of justice and exposing state crimes committed by the United States. And the Russian boots, they were simply a name I borrowed from a fiction book of someone on a similar path as me, which I gave to an old pair of an old pair of rugged boots that carried me through hard living. The idea that these references could serve as bellicism from Russia is absurd. Once the contents of Running from Empty Shoes are accurately contextualized, you'll discover its true meaning is too insignificant to offer the Irish and American governments a rational basis to carry out its intimidation and surveillance. Doing so represents a clear manifestation of institutional paranoia on their part. In my honest opinion, the United States gave the Pakistani woman an undue advantage to obstruct my asylum proceedings. While she never used force or threats, it is clear they procured her false testimony to undermine my asylum proceedings. Because the agents of persecution were not carrying out a legitimate investigation into a national security concern, the Pakistani woman's course of conduct meets the definition of a transnational offense. The elements for obstruction of justice has been sufficiently met and has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Count 5, obstruction of justice. Under this count, there is clear evidence of interdiction. An Algerian man took possession of my postal parcel containing my international protection documentation and retained it for several hours at an undisclosed location. My report to the Guardian was met with a complete failure to investigate, an extremely irregular response given the unauthorized collection of sensitive governmental documents. The situation became truly unsettling when he collected my parcel on the very day I was due to retrieve it. My attempt to discuss the matter with the Algerian man was met with a dismissal. Quote, "I don't need to talk to you," end quote. This leaves a critical question. What motive would an asylum seeker have for taking possession of another person's documentation, removing it from the premises? Here we can exclude Ireland. Ireland would have no reason to employ an asylum seeker for this task. They could simply access the documents through official channels. This act strongly suggests cooperation with the United States. While he never used force or threats, it is clear his intimidating actions were part of a transnational enterprise where the decision was likely altered by agents of persecution to undermine my asylum proceedings. Because the agents of persecution were not carrying out a legitimate investigation into a national security concern, the Algerian man's course of conduct meets the definition of a transnational offense. The elements for obstruction of justice has been sufficiently met and has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Count 6, obstruction of justice. The next set of individuals are not merely informants, they are, in my estimation, agents of influence or intelligence assets placed in close proximity. Bradley Hale, a man claiming to be an asylum seeker from South Africa, eavesdropped on my conversations despite my telling him that I felt uncomfortable about it. And he did it on several occasions. Despite there being a conflict between us, IPAS moved him into a room with a woman he claimed to be his mother, which was inside the family building where I resided. Prior to this, he resided in an all-male building. He often looked worried when I began to figure things out and the scales of justice tilted in my favor, but he looked relieved when the scales were going against me. Is Hale connected to Elon Musk? That, to me, is too extreme. You see, Musk didn't run any intelligence agencies. Recent evidence demonstrates Musk isn't a team player and is bad at political governing. So no South Africana angle. One day I was walking in the hallway in my accommodation and I heard the cacophony of disagreement in the accommodation. Hale was arguing with someone on the phone, demanding someone get him out of the situation. No Irish angle here. That just doesn't seem like a conversation an asylum seeker would have with a government they are seeking asylum from, unless he was speaking to Donal Herlihy. This is a man claiming to be an asylum seeker ally and has ties to the Catholic Church. Donal Herlihy appeared at Kinsale late one evening claiming to teach English, yet when I inquired as to who all the English teachers were in the center, none spoke his name. While some knew him, they didn't know him to be a teacher of English. Another odd occurrence is Herlihy appeared at Kinsale on the same night I called the Gardaí. He also appeared at Kinsale when I delivered a summons to Hale. All guests at Kinsale were required to sign in at the desk. However, the logs on the days in question showed he never signed in. Not once. Research also demonstrates Herlihy is connected to and or related to a man that owns an intelligence agency in the Republic of Ireland. But is there a connection between Donal Herlihy and Maurice O'Sullivan? Maurice was a security guard at Kinsale who was intransigent in his conservative views and presented as a man with an unusually deep and specific knowledge of the United States political landscape and ideologies. His conversations consistently focused on American internal affairs, were political in nature, intriguing, and thought provoking. Here is something strange. One day, he left out of the accommodation with a male asylum seeker. Now, I must clarify I'm not making any implication about his friendship with the male asylum seeker. In fact, when I asked him about this, he said the asylum seeker gave him a ride to the store to buy cigarettes. Yet the store was not far from the accommodation. It was like a 10-minute walk. Both he and the asylum seeker had information technology skills. When I brought this up once, he said, "You're not supposed to know that." Maurice and I would speak for hours every time he worked. Literally, we spoke 5 to 6 hours on the days he worked without much interruption. Sometimes we had discussions until 3 o'clock in the morning. A asylum seeker pointed out to me that for a security guard, this was not normal. No, to be clear, there has never been a romantic connection between us, and we didn't exchange contact details when he left. It had been alleged that Maurice was fired for having a confrontation with a male asylum seeker. While I do remember that confrontation, I cannot say for sure if this was the reason for his departure. To clarify, I don't think our discussions were the reason either, because we always asked each other if one of us didn't want to speak to the other, we would be honest about it. But after engaging with these men, my honest opinion is, and the facts that I have collected objectively demonstrates, their intention to commit the crimes outlined above. As stated, under Article 5.2 of the United Nations Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime, the intention and knowledge required under Article 5.1a.2 may be inferred from objective factual circumstances. Thus, the elements for participation in organized crime group has been met and has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Count 7, transnational organized crime. Thomas Stofiel was a Jewish American asylum seeker who lost his life in the Republic of Ireland. It's hard for me to believe that Stofiel would seek sanctuary in the Republic of Ireland and then suddenly take his own life. If he did, someone or something like political repression drove him to do it. Organizations in the Republic of Ireland failed to help him, in my opinion, because he had a checkered past and a Jewish identity. Even though he allegedly ranted about his own people, it was because he thought some didn't adhere to orthodoxy. So I don't think there is enough evidence to suggest Israel had anything to do with his unalivement. Not China, not Russia. The perpetrators here are the United States, and its co-conspirator is Ireland. While the evidence before me indicates Thomas was the victim of the actions of the United States and Irish governments, I cannot prove beyond a reasonable doubt that either obstructed justice. I can, however, move forward with the claim that Thomas was the victim of transnational repression. For now, this charge will be put on hold. The Mimicking McCarthyism series gives an overview of most of the incidents, so you may want to begin with episode 1 and work your way to this episode. But here are a few more important facts. PSNI told me that I couldn't file an asylum claim when I arrived in Northern Ireland because of my American nationality, which I believe departs from the intent of the 1951 convention. Second, being signposted by the same organizations who sent me back and forth to each other, much like a hamster on the wheel, was not service. It was a disservice. We discovered a significant fabrication in an email alleging that it came from the Home Office that surfaced when a manipulative person tried to force me out of my accommodation provider to house me alone, despite my not engaging in any activity to warrant such treatment. What's more, human rights and equality commissions not only failed to adhere to their mandate, but they also claimed they never heard of transnational repression. Let's depart from that for now. Count 8, obstructing justice. In 2024, I met a woman at 2 Royal Avenue claiming her name was Nora and to be born in Saudi Arabia. One day she claimed the U.S. Embassy in Dublin had questioned her about me in an email and told her to be careful. When I asked to see the emails, she refused. She was also masquerading as an American from Austin, Texas, my hometown, claiming to be a Trump supporter. Yet when I asked her what part of Austin she resided in her favorite spot, she couldn't name anything. One day she appeared at the McClay library not being a student and tried to intimidate me because I had called out her deception. She also lied and said I assaulted her, but she overlooked the fact that several students were in the same space as us, particularly an Asian student who witnessed the entire incident and told officials that that did not happen. Here, I need to show that the agent of persecution encouraged Nora to engage in the following: the use of physical force, threats, or intimidation, or the promise, offering, or giving undue advantage so as to obstruct my asylum proceedings. While she never used force, she did use threats. It is also clear they procured Nora's false testimony to undermine my right to education. Because the agents of persecution were not carrying out a legitimate investigation into a national security concern, Nora's course of conduct meets the definition of a transnational offense. The elements for obstruction of justice has been sufficiently met and has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Count 9, causing fear of violence. Intelligence agencies placed a Somali asylum seeker who previously resided in my accommodation. I reported a disturbing pattern of escalating threats and violence within this home. The situation first turned dangerous when she twice branded a butcher knife. Also saw her in a diplomatic car with an Irishman who had a herb emblem pinned to his collar. Yet my reports to the PSNI were dismissed, with officers telling me the incidents didn't amount to a crime. I further stated that the woman stole my dictaphone, a crucial device I used to document my interactions and to protect myself. When I reported the theft, PSNI simply responded that the woman claimed to have left the device outside her door. I firmly dispute her version of events. Events reached a breaking point during a revelation when I tried to record for my own safety. I assert the woman performed a menacing slit to the throat gesture, a chilling act of intimidation. Under Section 6 of the Protection from Harassment Northern Ireland Order 1997, PSNI and likely NASO's course of conduct caused me fear on at least 2 occasions when they instructed the woman to engage in this course of conduct. In other words, I feared that violence would be used against me. Both knew or ought to have known their actions and my accommodation would cause me fear. A reasonable and prudent person witnessing and hearing the statements that I did would think the course of conduct would cause someone to feel fearful. The agents of persecution's course of conduct was not pursued for the purpose of preventing or detecting crime, nor does it meet any other elemental defenses. What I need to show is the woman engaged in the following: the use of physical force, threats, or intimidation, or for the promise or offering, giving an undue advantage so as to obstruct my asylum proceedings. The evidence before me permits me to move forward with a public charge of obstructing justice and to classify the woman as a co-conspirator in transnational organized crime. PSNI and NISOs, for their own distinct reasons, saw my dissertation on transnational repression as a liability and sought to undermine it, as well as my standing as a nonviolent activist through a consistent campaign of intimidation, interfering with my testimony and the evidence I would produce at an international protection hearing. Thus, the element for obstruction of justice has been met and has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, we will examine other incidents between 2024 and 2025 that make out a prima facie case of obstruction of justice. First, the police ombudsman for the Northern Ireland alleged that it sent a complaint I made about the PSNI back to them, who never investigated my concerns nor sent any follow-up documentation. Why would the police ombudsman, who is responsible for investigating police wrongdoing, send a complaint that had not been handled properly back to the institution, who had not handled it properly to begin with? Because of cooperation. Another concern is all the asylum organizations in Northern Ireland were silent on my victimization, failing to speak up on my behalf. I don't think that they would do this for the United States. Third, a Queen's University Belfast professor who claimed to be an anti-racist, leading a symposium on racism, reproached me when I sought her help during a time of victimization. According to her, it wasn't the right time to speak out. I don't think she would do this for the United States. Fourth, I was enrolled in an international human rights law program around academics teaching and students studying human rights law. Most knew I was planning to write my dissertation on transnational repression, yet no one advocated on my behalf when the university made an excuse to silence my research. This is despite some postgraduate students protesting on campus in support of Mahmoud Khalil, claiming he was being silenced. But I don't think that they would do this for the United States. Fifth, nearly all the solicitors across Belfast refused to take me on as a client, which seems odd since at the time of this broadcast, more than 20 firms on the Law Society website claims that they take immigration and asylum cases. Six, the Law Society security guards acted and are continuing to act as gatekeepers to the Law Society and not opening the doors to the public when other people say they are supposed to be. Seven, a cyber criminal with access to my email account altered the tribunal's decision in a legal attempt to cause me to doubt reality and my reality about the tribunal's decision, where she rendered that I should be given Section 95 support. Let's see, one should note here that on the 2nd of December 2025, Someone placed a fraudulent letter in front of my door today claiming, or on that day, claiming that I was engaged in inappropriate behavior. Yet when mayors visited on December 1st, they didn't bring up any such actions. In fact, my communications with my housemates have been respectful and we get along great. This demonstrates that there is a cyber criminal in our midst who has been given free rein to engage in transnational repression. 8. The Bar Association of Northern Ireland refused my application for a barrister. In fact, someone named Nora Banks intercepted my application at the association. Considering the facts in points 1 through 8, I believe I can prove participation in a transnational organized crime group. All of the parties took part in activities with knowledge that their participation would contribute to the achievement of the organization's criminal aim, to throw me into a bad life, live out their racism, and to subject me to degrading treatment and punishment. Under Article 5.2 of the United Nations Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime, the intention and knowledge required under Article 5.1a.2 may be inferred from objective factual circumstances. Thus, the elements for participation in organized crime, as well as a group, has been proven beyond reasonable doubt. Count 10, participation in organized crime. Jamie-Lukas Campbell alleges he is an advocate for the Black community and queer community. He is allegedly an American and a PhD student at Queen's University, Belfast. He is charismatic, popular, and has the potential to influence many groups. My question is this: is Campbell a participant in the organized crime happening in Northern Ireland? Here's a breakdown. The LGBTQ community would trust the information Campbell says because he is queer. The African Caribbean community would trust what Campbell says because he is Black and claims to be an advocate for marginalized groups. The academic community may trust what Campbell says because he is well-spoken and personable. The police may trust what Campbell says because he has prior service in the military, together with his declaration of having experience in international relations. Authority figures may trust what Campbell says because he worked in internal affairs for Democratic officials. When I was at Queen's University, Belfast, I asked Campbell multiple times to stand in solidarity with me, and he refused. He always acted as if he had somewhere to be, was short on time, or had somewhere or someone to meet. On 2 occasions, he literally tried to keep me from participating in 2 events. When I inquired further about why he had not stood in solidarity with me, he said, "I'm your biggest advocate on this campus." But that was not true. He had not been, and there is no evidence that he's advocating for me now. In fact, the evidence leads to a trail of betrayal. The only fact that throws me off this trail is there appears to be evidence that Campbell has been in Belfast for quite some time before me. I've seen pictures of him when he was younger at Queen's University, Belfast. The TED Talk on YouTube seems more recent and could have been recorded to throw me off this trail. Another fact that throws me off this trail is when Campbell saw me looking at his research output he posted in the School of Law, he removed it from the bulletin board, which could suggest he was responding to the McCarthyist smear campaigns he was hearing on campus about me. But if he was sincerely my biggest ally, Why would he feel the need to conceal his research output from me, letting everyone but me view it? That is not a sign of allegiance. It is a sign of distrust. Nonetheless, there is not enough evidence to suggest Campbell participated in the actions of an organized crime group in Belfast. Count 11, participation in an organized crime group. The old man in the McClay library in episode 16, which I will link in the description box below, never worked on much of anything while I had access to the campus. The scent on this trail is growing. He often hung out with a bald-headed white man in the McClay library that struck me on one occasion or two as being very American, perhaps Irish American. On the day I survived the interim measures, I saw both of them for the first time in the graduate school, whispering to each other in the corner. They looked very worried. In all the months I had been a student at Queen's, I had never seen either of them in the graduate school, which I had frequented. If not Israel, China, or Russia, then who? The Republic of Ireland, the United States, and Northern Ireland. That's who. First, suspension efforts. My writing a dissertation on the Republic of Ireland, Northern Ireland, and the United States perpetration of transnational repression was a perceived threat to information hegemony. After engaging with this man, I believe the facts objectively demonstrate his knowledge of either the aim and general criminal activity of an organized crime group. But why? Its intention is to commit the crimes outlined above, and I believe he actively took part in these criminal activities that I have named above. As stated, under Article 5.2 of the United Nations Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime, the intention and knowledge required under Article 5.1a.2 may be inferred from objective factual circumstances, which has been outlined above. Thus, this crime has been met beyond all reasonable doubt. Count 12, transnational organized cybercrimes. I experienced numerous cyber attacks to my devices in both the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. They damaged 2 laptops and a cell phone in the Republic of Ireland. In Northern Ireland, they damaged 1 cell phone and 1 tablet. They also siphoned the minutes from my SIM cards, leaving me without data to search the internet or to make phone calls. They gained access to multiple email accounts, blocked my access to them, and locked me out of my social media accounts. Further, they altered my university assessments and tribunal decisions, doing so to perpetrate transnational repression. PSNI and Queen's University Belfast refused to investigate these crimes, which objectively shows they were aiding and abetting them. The evidence further points to a transnational organized crime group carrying out these attacks for a governmental figure or intelligence agency. NISOS is domiciled in Belfast and has connections to the United States. It's well within the realm of possibility for NISOS or some police service to contract with Irish IT persons to engage in cybercrime. For instance, when I was a student at Queen's University Belfast, on multiple occasions I had conversations with people with IT skills within the graduate school. I asked them for their advice regarding the cyber incidents, but received none. Through conversation, I learned that some of them with IT skills didn't actually go to Queen's University Belfast, nor did they hold an associate pass. Another strange occurrence is after Queen's University Belfast ousted me and I ended my contract, NISOs had a celebration. They could have been celebrating another achievement, but the timing here seems to point to ejecting me from my program. Here's the public charge. Their cybercrimes have been committed in the Republic of Ireland, in Northern Ireland. It is committed in Northern Ireland, but a substantial part of its preparation, planning, direction, or control takes place in the Republic of Ireland, and likely the United States. It has also been committed in Northern Ireland, but involves a organized crime group that engaged and is engaging in criminal activities in the Republic of Ireland, in Northern Ireland. Illegal access. The transnational cyber hackers illegally access my devices by infringing security measures with the intent of obtaining computer data or other non-illegal content, doing so with a dishonest intent. Illegal interception. Second, they committed the illegal interception when they intentionally intercepted my communications without right. It was committed with a dishonest intent. Data interference. Third, they intentionally damaged, deleted, deteriorated, altered, and suppressed the data on my devices without a right. Fourth, system interference. They seriously hindered, without right, the functioning of my computer systems on my devices by inputting, transmitting, damaging, deleting, deteriorating, altering, and or suppressing computer data. Computer mistools. Although the use of Stingray or Pegasus is concerning, I will not be bringing a public conviction against the suppliers because it's not illegal to sell these devices. It's how the government decides to use these devices that makes it illegal. Fifth, computer-related forgery. They intentionally and without right inputted, altered, deleted, and suppressed computer data, resulting in inauthentic data with the intent that it will be considered or acted upon for illegal purposes as if it were authentic, regardless of whether or not the data is directly readable and intelligible. All of this achieved with the intent to interfere with my asylum proceedings, my right to housing, and to defraud me of my LLM university degree. 6. Computer-related fraud. The cyber hackers intentionally and without right caused me to lose laptops and mobile phones when they inputted, altered, deleted, and suppressed computer data from them, interfered with the functioning of those computer systems with a fraudulent or dishonest intent of procuring without right an economic benefit for themselves and others. All of this achieved with the intent to interfere with my asylum proceedings, my right to housing, and to defraud me of my LLM university degree. The verdict. I find the United States, the Republic of Ireland, Northern Ireland, and their co-conspirators guilty of obstruction of justice and participation in transnational organized crime and cybercrimes. If you are Amnesty International, Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission, human rights professors in Belfast, solicitors, media, and students who care about human rights in Belfast, it is time that you speak up. In episode 21, I will be answering the question as to whether these organizations, whether these governments could have achieved their aims through less inhumane measures and less oppressive means to either prevent me from being an asylum seeker stop me from attending university, and other acts that I personally feel they could have done more humanely if they felt that they needed to teach me a lesson. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. We'll talk to you next time. Bye bye.